Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Corridor Conversations. Once again, I'm Kurt Strauth, President and CEO of the Iowa Lakes Corridor, and happy to have you back with us as we're shooting live once again from the Spencer Collab space right here in downtown Spencer. And a huge shout out, Craig, and I'm going to introduce you here in a second, but a huge shout out to our sponsor, Medlar Coffee, who has some of the best coffee right here in downtown Spencer. So today we're excited. We have a special guest here with us today. Many of you hear us talk about Professional Developers of Iowa. So a little intro to today's conversation. Professional Developers of Iowa is really the economic development arm and voice for what we do here across the state in terms of economic development. And we do a lot with that. And today I'm excited to have Craig Patterson with PDI. And so Craig actually is our lobbyist on the legislative front. And we just got done having a legislative roundtable and where we had a number of area legislators, and we kind of just rolled out our legislative priorities for 2026. So I think our goal today is kind of let the audience know kind of what happens on the lobbyist level, how do we establish our PDI priorities and our legislative priorities for economic development. So we're going to kind of get into that. But before we kind of get into the weeds on some of that, Craig, I just want to give you the opportunity to kind of introduce yourself, maybe a little bit of your background, where you currently live and kind of your tie into PDI world and economic development.
Sure. Yeah. Well, Craig Patterson. I've been lobbying for at the State House for 24 sessions, and this upcoming session will be my 25th. I co-own Campbell Patterson Consulting along with my business partner Amy Campbell. Yeah. So we sort of divide and conquer. PDI has been a client that has been with us since the beginning. Honestly, PDI is one of the reasons that we were able to go out on our own back in 2003 and create our own government affairs firm. So I live in Grimes. Amy lives in Johnston. Got two daughters that are college age. One of them's almost done at Iowa, and another one's a sophomore at UNI. But yeah, I grew up out in Tucson though, and graduated from the University of Arizona. After graduation, I moved to Washington, D.C., and started working on Capitol Hill for Congressman Jim Nussle, who represented Northeast Iowa from 1990 to 2006. So I spent 5 years on his staff. That's what really got me the Iowa ties. When my wife and I were looking to move out of the D.C. area after September 11th, had a bunch of business cards from Iowans that I had met, through my work with Nussle, and started calling through to figure out who was hiring, and then ended up moving out here late 2001.
Gotcha. And so, just for a little bit of background, so PDI, Professional Developers of Iowa, we have about 300 members, and we get the opportunity, you and I, to serve on the board together. And so, you as a lobbyist arm of what we do, but you're very, very involved, obviously, in the legislative piece of it too, which we appreciate it because you're the feet on the floor at the Capitol when we get into legislative time, and to be able to have that piece right in our board seat or right in our board table is vital. So, so as we move forward, we're going to break the ice here a little bit, a little Medlar moment. You and I were chatting a little bit beforehand, and most people don't know this, but I actually grew up an Arizona Wildcat fan, and not so much a diehard fan anymore now, but as you and I got to know each other a few years ago, I found out you were one of very, very small amount of people that are actually an Arizona Wildcat fan too, right? I mean, tell me a little bit about that history and kind of how you arrived to be a Wildcat fan.
I'm an Arizona Wildcat fan because I grew up in Tucson.
Yeah.
So I went to the hometown university, and so I have all my Arizona. My license plate is even it's an Iowa plate, but it's got it's AZ Wildcat. I mean. So I'm Wildcat through and through.
Yep. No, that's awesome. That's awesome. And 1997 was the year of the Wildcat for me anyway, because the year they won the national championship, I was a senior in high school, and I remember wearing my Miles Simon jersey. He's a senior that year. Two high school, and everybody's like, Strauth, you're a massive bandwagon fan, because most people don't realize that there's actual Arizona Wildcat fans kind of floating around us, and I walk in that day and everybody's like, there's no way you've been a long-standing Arizona Wildcat fan. And I just want you to know, and I put it on the record, actually, I used to be. Not as much now, but back in the day, I was influenced as a young child, and Arizona kind of rose to the top for me. So,
97 was the year. I think still the only team to knock off 3 number 1 seeds.
Yep, on the way there. Yeah, they were not slated to get past the Sweet 16 that year. I do remember, and so it's pretty cool experience. And as a Viking fan, I've mentioned this on this podcast before. As a Viking fan, we don't really get a relish in victories all that much, and so if I have to go all the way back to 1997 to a Wildcat championship, we'll have to do that. So.
Yeah, well, and just for the record, I'm also a Viking fan.
There we go.
Mostly by marriage, because my wife is from Minneapolis.
Yeah.
So yeah, I sort of got roped into also rooting for the Vikings. So there's a lot of similarities there. There's a lot of heartbreak.
Yeah,
when you're
totally.
Yeah.
Yep. We can name those years too. Ironically enough, 1998 was a year after the Wildcat championship. Remember the '98 championship with the Atlanta Falcons and the heartbreak from Gary Anderson's missed field goal and.
Oh yeah.
All of that stuff. But so what does Craig Patterson like to do in his downtime to break away from the legislative piece that you're so well versed in?
Well, yeah, when I don't have to be, I mean, obviously January through April, we've got to be at the Capitol every day, and that's. But yeah, when I don't, when the legislature slows down a little bit, my wife and I love to travel.
Yep.
We'd love to been to all 50 states. We were able to get both of our daughters to all 50 states. So yeah, that's what we'd love to do in the downtime.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And so economic development, we talk about, Iowa Lakes Corridor, we serve 4 counties of economic development, and a lot of what we do and promote as far as our services is the legislative advocacy. We're making sure we're getting in front of our legislators. Like for example, today, we had 6 legislators in the room to kind of talk what our priorities are looking like here in 2026 from things like TIF, from property tax reform, for quality of life, childcare, housing, all those things continue to be a driving force. Mm-hmm. From your standpoint, how important do you feel being involved from an economic development standpoint, especially at the local level, is to be in front of our legislators, talking about our priorities, so as they're going into the legislative session, that they know where we stand? Like, how do you feel about that?
Yeah, I think honestly, local advocacy, there's really nothing that matches that. Mm-hmm. And I try to remind people all the time that I'm in there tracking legislation. So is Amy. We'll have an intern team with us. But at the end of the day, I only vote in one House district and one Senate district. I can't I can talk to all these legislators and get to know them around the state, but I don't have that type of access to all of them. We really need economic developers to be talking to legislators locally, getting to know them. A lot of, and actually I just said this in our forum with the legislators there. When you're elected to the legislature, I mean, first of all, most legislators, just so you know, they were sold a bill of goods when they were talked into running. They were told it was a 4-month job.
Yep.
It's not a 4-month job. They're at it all year. But when you get elected to the legislature, you come in as a teacher or as a banker, or you have some sort of skill set that you come in with, but you have to make decisions on all of these different programs. Yeah. So you're not an expert in all of these programs. So if you've got as a legislator, if you've got an economic developer or folks that are doing projects locally that you can count on, that you can pick up the phone and say, hey, Kurt, walk me through this. Is this a good bill, or is this something I should try to to stop from happening? What do you think of this? Yeah. That's crucial. Yeah. And they're looking for that. They're looking for that resource, on a bunch of different levels. Who can I go to if I've got a question about, community health centers, or they're looking for those connections. So before you get into session, now's the time to really be reaching out to them, getting to know them, walking them through the issues you have. Because once January comes, they're running. They're running constantly, and it's really hard to, get 5 minutes of their time.
Yeah, no, for sure. And you talk about how important it is to get to know them. It's a first name basis. Like, if you want to be effective mm-hmm. in moving the needle a little bit when it comes to legislative advocacy and being influential, like, they need to know who you are as a developer, and developer, you need to know who these legislators are representing your community. And one thing that stood out to me today is, a lot of times we may have their contact information in our phones or in our computers, but what they want is our personal contact information as well. So when they are on the floor making these decisions, maybe last minute, they're going to remember these type of conversations and may step out of the room and say, I need to call Kurt to say, what's PDI's position on this again? And just kind of, reinsert that or revisit it to make sure they're making the right decision. So it's important, to your point, and that personal connection. And it's a relationship business, just like anything that we do in development. It is with the legislative piece too, and it's important. So So as we in PDI kind of establish our priorities, I mean, you being our lobbyist, I mean, so what role do you actually play then? Do you feel what your role is in actually promoting some of the priorities as we move into session?
Sure. Yeah, and we get asked a lot. I think there's a lot of folks that have sort of a question about what a lobbyist does.
Mm-hmm.
I think, I joke that my mom, if you ask her what I do, she'll say I work in government affairs. That she won't say I'm a lobbyist, but because there's a lot of misconceptions about what a lobbyist is.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, the way to think about it really is, Kurt, you have a job to do here.
Yep.
You've got you've got a 4-county area that you're trying to serve. You've got a staff, that are working on that. You can't drop everything and head to the Capitol, at once, a couple of days a week,
Yep.
To be able to track things. That's why collectively PDI, they will hire somebody like myself. I'm in there every day. We read, Amy and I read every bill that's introduced, and we tag everything, for, okay, this is going to affect you somehow, and then make you the membership aware of that. And that's really the goal, is to try to facilitate that conversation, watching what legislation is coming forward, what we might need to work against, and then letting the membership know, hey, this is out here. Mm-hmm. So that way, instead of expecting all of these folks to quit their or leave their job to manage the Capitol.
Yeah. It is so important, and PDI being that network of over 300 individuals from across the state, I mean, we're all fighting for economic development together, mm-hmm. and collaboratively for the state first, and to be able to have a unified voice to go into the legislative session, I think is important. And you're so talented, your team is so talented in taking that unified voice of what we are and who we are, and transferring that at the state capitol level. And we've had a lot of good success over the last number of years, and there's certainly some challenges, obviously, sure. If we're going to get into. But you're right. I mean, we have a lot of stuff to do at a local level, and legislative priorities and legislative advocacy is a big piece of that. But to have somebody that's sitting at the table all the time, such as yourself, is huge. So,
right.
Yep. And so, hot off the press, and we delivered this today. So we hosted a legislative roundtable here in Spencer this morning, and we presented to a group of about 6 area legislators. I think we had about 25 other representatives in the room today, from economic development leaders to city council members to county board of supervisors to the full gamut, chamber directors, mm-hmm. to kind of deliver this. And PDI, and you're going to be going across the state, around the state of Iowa, the next month to kind of deliver these across the state as well.
Sure.
But high level, real quickly, just maybe some of the high-level priorities as we head into the legislative session that have been identified from PDI, if you don't mind just sharing a couple of those.
Right, and and if you and then the agenda will be posted too. So on PDIiowa.com is the is the website for PDI, and I won't get into kind of going over because we try to keep an idea, just keep our ears open mm-hmm. to the development community around the state and figure out what barriers are there out there? What are people running up against? What programs would be helpful? The roundtables are hugely effective. Just in sometimes we'll have things that'll pop up out of the roundtables that we never thought of before. Great, and the partnership between some of the state entities as well. Mm-hmm. Out of 10, 12 years ago, we were at a roundtable and somebody had talked about certified sites. As a concept, they had said, they had talked about what was happening in, I think, New York State or something, and we started talking about that in our roundtables. Next thing you knew, the department director, Debbie, picked that up and ran with it, and created a program that's way better than any of us, individually could have come up with. Mm-hmm. So those conversations are helpful, I think. So we try to be broad-based, so we can reflect what's happening at the legislature. But I do think this year, whatever happens on property taxes and on tax increment financing are going to be probably taking up the most of our energy for PDI. Just trying to, and PDI is not anti property tax reform. Obviously, I think there's a lot that can be done to make the system a lot more streamlined. It's just a matter of how it's done, and making sure that local governments have the resources available at the end of the day to still provide the services that Iowans expect.
Yeah, for sure. And part of it, is we got to make sure we're educating our legislators on this, which we talked about a little bit before, and we're able to partner with the Iowa League of Cities on some of this too, because a lot of what you're talking about with the property tax reform and TIF, I mean, we're two separate organizations, but we're really lockstep and barrel with a lot of this stuff from a priority standpoint. And for TIF, TIF is from an economic developer, it's one of our only tools in our toolbox from a rural community level to be able to help facilitate economic growth. And I speak for all of our constituents across the state in economic development, and we need that tool.
Right.
And we need to make sure we're protecting it whatever we possibly can. And again, going back to that partnership with Iowa League of Cities, developing that website this year to be able to take our local community level projects and be able to put that into a database so we're better able to share on the House floor whenever that time is right projects across the state of Iowa who have benefited from the use of TIF.
Yep.
And how that has helped grow communities, because I think there's always misconceptions about anything, and it's our job to make sure that we tell the positive stories and how they're impacting us at a rural level, and really the relative growth that comes from a tool of that nature. So.
Yep, absolutely. Well, with tax increment financing too, I think it's important. We're trying to hone our messaging on that as well,
Yep.
but I think it's important for people to understand that because it is complicated.
Yep.
That it's saving taxpayers money. I mean, in a lot of cases, you're using the development, you're bonding against using revenues, to put investment in, whereas the other option would be to spread it across all your taxpayers,
right?
By increasing their property taxes. So you're able to kind of hone in a little bit more on projects that may be more of more value to the businesses that are affected. Rather, have them pay more of that share.
Yeah.
So it is good for taxpayers. It is it is a system that and a tool that at the end of the day saves taxpayers money.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think it's a tool that we're all, I think, from a development standpoint, all understand how important it is. And with your efforts and the efforts of the over 300 members from across the state, and including League of Cities, I will say. I mean, I think we're doing a good job of getting that word out there, and TIF is just going to be something I feel like we're going to talk about every single year. Would you agree? I think we just have to make sure our messaging is appropriate.
Pretty much every year there's a TIF bill.
Yeah.
Yeah. I've been up there 24 years, and pretty much every year it's been a TIF bill of some sort.
Yep. So the property tax reform a little bit. I mean, last year was a year that we kind of got into it, maybe a little bit. I mean, it was introduced more than probably it ever has been in the past, and it got some legs. And what are you forecasting this year from the property tax side?
Yeah, it's hard to say if they're going to make any traction. I mean, it's going to be a tough session. I think it'll be a short session. The budget's going to be an issue this year, so I think legislators will want to get out of there. And property tax is such a big lift. I mean, they've been wanting to do something for the whole time I've been in this profession.
Yep.
So, I mean. Last year there was a Senate bill that would have moved the ball quite a ways down the field. I think it's going to come down to if they can get together, the House, the Senate, and the governor on an approach. And we're having a lot of conversations right now around the state just with different folks about what they're hearing. I think there's a little bit of a emphasis on tax. They're going to do tax relief, property tax relief versus reform. I think PDI would come at it from the standpoint of reform. Like, if we're gonna take that on, let's do something that changes the system and makes it more transparent, easier to predict. Especially for development. If you have somebody that comes in now, you can tell them what your income tax is going to be for the next 5 years. You can't make any sort of prediction about what kind of property taxes they'll pay.
Right.
So the system is really convoluted. So we would like to see some sort of reform, but if they go relief instead, then you're probably looking at more maybe caps on how much it can rise every year, and I don't know that that's long term is going to be as helpful.
Right.
And there's a few things. I mean, PDI put together a sheet last year with some suggestions to think about for legislators moving forward. Public safety is a big piece that's not addressed in any of those the proposals that have been put forward. And I think we all support police and fire.
Yep.
But police and fire, the cost of police and fire is a major driver for a lot of communities, and there isn't really a way to to have that discussion within the current bills. There probably needs to be more of a discussion along those lines.
Yeah.
So there's a few other things. I think House File 718 that passed a couple of years ago, that removed all of the voter-approved levies.
Okay.
A lot of communities weren't happy with that. So I think a discussion about if you prioritize a library in your in your area, and you've got you voted, your voters voted for a library levy or a convention center levy before, that's clearly a priority. So probably local government should be able to have that. So there's a lot of pieces though that are going to have to be sorted out like that.
Yep, it's going to be interesting to see kind of how we kind of transition into the legislative piece on that, and which makes it even more important now, Craig, as we're talking about these roundtables currently going on around the state, that we have our legislators right in front of us, that we're introducing this right now, understanding that, hey, this is something that's on our radar, and our growth obviously is to continue to do what the governor wants to do, is continue to grow our population, and well, we need tools in our toolbox to help support that, and so we're just telling it how it is, right? I mean, in a very nice, politically correct way. So a few of the other priorities that we talked about this morning as we head into the end of the year, we always talk, housing, the workforce housing tax credit program has been funded about $35 million per year through the state of Iowa. That's something that's continuing to be a priority. From a PDI standpoint, that's something that's funded a number of projects here in the corridor, which is exciting. There is a possible play of increasing that from 35 to 50. We'll see if that gets any traction. I mean, 35 million to 50 million, because of $35 million pool here in 2025 through the state, there were $86 million of projects that were applied for. So you can see from a percentage standpoint, there's a lot of good projects out there. Not all of them are great. But there's a lot of good projects that aren't getting funded, and we continue to talk about our rural communities that we need housing. So that is one that'll be coming up. And we continue to talk about, high quality of life. We talk about that, which includes childcare.
Sure.
City of Spencer, City of Storm Lake in our region did take advantage of the grant through IEDA this last couple of years to help fund childcare studies to help show that demand, and so those continue to be some of the priorities too that we'll stay focused on. Anything else priority-wise that you want to maybe touch base on as we maybe move into the session? We talked about infrastructure a little bit, and continuing to reinvest in the future of Iowa with workforce development and some of that stuff.
Yeah, there's a land redevelopment trust bill too. PDI has been working on for several years, and that's pretty close to the finish line. It still has to come out of committee in the Senate and get it passed through there, but there's a few other concepts too that we're honing in on that we'll have to see if we can get some traction.
Yep.
But yeah, I mean, quality of life is something that is really good. A huge issue for trying to get younger people really to locate in some of our communities. Yeah. It's what they're looking for trails, and different amenities, and that's something we're going to have to figure out a way to prioritize that, make funding available.
Yeah, I mean, with more jobs right now than what we have people, we've talked about this at the local level here across the region, that individuals are going where they want to live first. Right? They're finding a community that provides that quality of life aspect first, knowing that they can find a job, right? Most times. And so communities are now in a position where they need to set themselves up for that recruitment piece to make people want to come to our communities and live first, and then let the job kind of funnel in behind them. It's a lot different than what it was maybe 15 or 20 years ago. Would you agree with that assessment based on what you're hearing from a PDI level? So just from a strategic planning standpoint, I think people just need to look at things a little bit different. So we kind of laid the stage here for some of our priority pieces as we head into 2026. As we head now into the session, what does that timeline look like from your standpoint? Like, I'm sure you got the dates already locked in your head, but there's a first funnel, there's a second, there's a whole process. Maybe lay that out for the listener on what that might look like.
Sure. Yeah. And I don't actually have all the dates locked in right off the top of my head.
But I figured all lobbyists had all those dates locked in. No, I'm just kidding.
The legislature always starts on the second Monday of January, though. So I think that's the 12th. I think was on our table. So we're getting closer. Yep. The session evolves though as it goes through, and that's what it's never the same. It's never the same day from one week to the next up there. But about we do have two funnels that pop onto the schedule halfway through the session. That they are a tool that the legislature uses to winnow down legislation that's not making forward progress.
Sure.
So a bill would have to get out of committee by that first funnel deadline. The second funnel deadline, it'd have to be out of committee in the other chamber in order to stay alive. So it's a way for the legislature, out in Congress, for example, all those bills are alive until the end. Mm-hmm. Well, in the Iowa legislature, some bills just kind of peel off, and then are no longer viable after those deadlines. It's actually makes it a lot easier, to track for us.
Yeah.
So, but now if you're planning a trip to Des Moines, though, to meet with your legislators, you want to keep those funnel deadlines in mind because it gets crazy up there, and especially the funnel week, but also the week before, that tail end of the week because there's so many subcommittee meetings around and they're just running around crazy, trying to keep up. So the funnel deadlines are huge on our end, and then 100 days in, I think April 16th maybe was what we were talking about, but that's the statutory end when their per diems run out. Iowa does not have a hard stop though on their legislative session, so they can go until they're done. But when the per diems end, they lose their clerks. There's more of an emphasis to really kind of wrap it up every year.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's a wild ride. I've been down there, many years, while legislative session is in play, and it's a rat race. For those that haven't been there, unless you're there, it's hard to actually explain and experience. But to track down your area legislators at the Capitol is tough.
Yeah.
You do have to have what we talk our elevator speech in place. If you do have a minute to grab them, you better be ready to tell them what you need to tell them, which makes what we're doing, the roundtable piece of it. We have them in the room for an hour, vitally important. Because we're not going to get that time down the road. But
Absolutely.
It's a fun experience for people to be there, to take part in it, to listen in on the meetings, track the bills, because it's vitally important in what we do for development and for city government. So.
Yep.
Okay, I want to ask you just a couple of questions here because I know there's a lot of history with you in lobbying, and do you have a story, like a crazy story that happened on the floor that you can share? That is ultimately memorable to you, because each year there's always something. I feel like, and I just didn't know if there was something that maybe popped out that was interesting that you maybe wanted to share that's always going to be memorable to you.
Honestly, I don't know that I've got anything that it's really. Because we've just seen a lot, and like last year, I know, we're up in northwestern Iowa right now, and the pipeline's a big issue up here. But just last year, just some of the stuff that was happening on the floor was it's kind of tough to watch sometimes because there's a lot of folks that are they're really tight. They work together a lot, and to see some of the I don't even know how to say it. It's just emotions were very high at the end of session last year, and that was hard to stomach. Some of that, but hopefully that'll get worked out one way or the other here soon in the upcoming session.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So
good. Well, maybe I'll twist it this way. Is there maybe a memorable moment that has happened maybe in your time as a lobbyist at the Capitol? Maybe it's not even at the Capitol. Maybe it's just in your career as a lobbyist that maybe something that pops out that you maybe never forget about.
Yeah, I think getting some of the victories done, there's certain ones that stick with you. I know I'm safe where I'm sitting talking about school start date. When we got school start date passed, that was huge because there was school districts that kept creeping forward. There were some that are about to start in July, and Branstad pulled the waivers away and was able to help us, at least get August 23rd locked in. Hopefully that'll stick. Yeah. I know, you've got a few legislators in this area of the state that are hugely helpful in trying to keep that, but there's a big emphasis around the state in removing that, letting schools kind of do what they want. But
sure.
Some of those bills that you work on for years like that, it's great when you finally see them signed into law.
Yeah, no, for sure. In the school start date, for our region, we're so tourist driven, and you feel like the summer is so short the way it is and goes so fast between, still summer sports in Iowa with baseball, softball for those kids that are still playing. It doesn't get done until mid part of July for some of them, depending on the state tournament, and everything about turning right around within a week or two to start school. I mean, that really affects your family vacations. It affects your tourism draw. And so, it's good to maybe consider. I know you said we got a lot of support from legislators up here on that. It is a big piece of it because tourism money draws a lot of money to the state economy and our local economy too. So,
yep, absolutely.
That's very good. Well, any last points of wisdom as a lobbyist, or things you'd like to share, or things maybe you're focused on as we head into the legislative session here?
I think the biggest thing is just talk to your legislators.
Yeah.
Really. I mean, I know we already talked about, the advocacy part of that, but at the end of the day, I mean, I try to get to know all of them, and we try to be a resource for them. But if they know that you and I are talking,
Yep.
if they get a call from you, and you're recounting something or asking them for a position on a bill, and they know that you and I are connected, they're gonna be more responsive to how they can be helpful, to what you're trying to get done.
Yeah.
So that local voice is just, I mean, I can't say enough how important that is.
Yeah, it's something you could take for granted and think that somebody else is doing. I'll be perfectly honest with you. When I was first in economic development, legislative advocacy was intimidating to me, right?
Sure.
Because you got the legislators that they're talking bills and things that really, maybe the common folks don't really understand, even those in the profession. So what I'll tell people is it takes, stepping out and having those conversations and talking to people who are smarter than you, such as why we have a lobbyist, right? I mean, you understand the game a little bit better. And then over time, building that relationship really helps move the needle. And, again, I appreciate all the work you do. I appreciate the organization we're able to serve together with professional developers of Iowa, our legislative committee who work so hard for our state to help put those things out there. And, our goal is to move the needle in a positive way to help, promote the priorities of economic development across the state, to grow population, to bring people in and grow our business space at the end of the day, and provide a high quality of life to continue to recruit people back here. So appreciate all the work that you do. Thanks for making the trip up to Northwest Iowa today to participate in our roundtable discussion with our legislators. And thanks again.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So thanks again for joining us today on the most latest episode of Corridor Conversations. I'm Kurt Strout, President and CEO of the Iowa Lakes Corridor. So until next time, have a great day.